Good afternoon, everybody. This is Eric Caller with the National Weather Service with Alaska statewide weather. A couple options for you to further refine your weather search. A 1-800 number takes you through a menu system on the phone, and a web page, weather.gov/Alaska. Take off Alaska, put in Fairbanks, Anchorage, or Juneau, and that again will help you find your weather needs. And lastly, if you have any questions about the program or any questions in general, please email us at the email there at the bottom of the screen. For hazards weather, we currently do not have any hazards in the state. Right now, we do have some small craft advisories and some gale warnings out for some coastal areas along the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and into the Gulf region, but otherwise on land, we do not currently have any watch warnings or advisories, but please, before you head out, check the map before you venture out. The wildland fire information, we had 441 strikes on August 4th. Most of those were in the Copper River Basin, and pretty nice cluster there in the Talkeetna Mountains, but otherwise spread out through the interior. Precipitation estimate for August 5th. This is ending at 4 a.m. this morning. A nice areas of precipitation in the northeast Gulf Coast, ½ to 1.5 inches there, maybe even 2 inches there in the northeast Gulf Coast. Down in the coastal mountains, down in Ketchikan, pretty good rain amounts down there, and lighter amounts through the interior with scattered amounts of 1/4 to 1/2 over a wide area of the mainland. Precipitation forecast ending at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. You can see the precipitation coming on shore over the southwest, and that extends down to the Alaska Peninsula. Also some pretty good rain down through the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, with 1/4 to 1/2 inch in some areas there. Otherwise, lesser amounts through the southeast interior up to about a 1/2 inch. Precipitation forecast picks up for August 7th, ending at 4 a.m. Pretty good rain amounts up to 2 to 5 inches possibly in the Alaska Range, southern Alaska Range there, and the eastern Kenai Peninsula and the mountains there. Otherwise, some 1/2 inch amounts expected in the southwest, and even 1/4 inch amounts continuing in the Panhandle. Otherwise, pretty good rain forecast for much of Alaska through August 7th. Looking at the satellite picture, you can see a occluded front with a low pressure system moving through the Aleutians, clouds and precipitation moving through that region. I did note some moderate rain in the eastern Aleutians there. Also some enhancements in the interior, maybe a few thunderstorms. Another low in the Gulf with an occluded front down there, spreading clouds and light precipitation into the Panhandle. Otherwise, fog was noted along the coastal areas, especially along the Arctic coast. For today's weather, 990 millibar low with an occluded front stretching out from that low. Rain showers through the southwest into the Alaska Peninsula, and fog and rain in through much of the Aleutians. Fog, as I noted, along the Arctic coast. A few buildups in the southeast interior, and another occluded front around a 1,000 millibar low there, and light rain in the Panhandle. For tonight's weather, 985 millibar low now as it approaches Bristol Bay with a occluded front, rain showers through much of the southwest, through the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutians, with a trough stretching out through the interior, with rain also showing up along the west coast. And Thursday's weather, looking at again a thermal trough forming across the interior with afternoon thunderstorms there. Fog continues along the Arctic coast around high pressure marine stratus there, and the low now on shore over the southwest, 989 millibar low there. Continued rain showers, even heavy rain possible in the Prince William Sound region. Otherwise, lingering showers over the Panhandle with an occluded front approaching the Panhandle there. Friday's weather, that low in the Gulf weakens to 990 millibar with troughs associated with that system. Rain into the Panhandle and through much of the southern mainland down through the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, thermal trough, afternoon thunderstorms once again, and continued fog along the Arctic coast. Low temperatures for Thursday morning, 40s along the north slope, 50s through much of the interior down through the southwest, even into south central, with 40s and low 50s down through Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. Savunga 41, Yakutat 47, 40s, upper 40s through portions of the Panhandle and low 50s there. Thursday afternoon, looking at 50s now across the portions of the Arctic coast there, 43 in Ukqiavik, 74 in Fort Yukon, 72 in Eagle, 72 in Fairbanks, 60s down through the southwest, 50s through the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, 60s through the Panhandle, 63 in Anchorage. And for low temperatures Friday morning, 40s again along the north slope, 52 in Fort Yukon, 40s and 50s through the southwest and interior, 50s in portions of South Central, 49 in King Salmon, 40s through the Alaska Peninsula, 50s through the Panhandle, and Friday afternoon, 70s again through portions of the interior, and 50s through the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the flying weather for Thursday morning, we're going to be dealing with some IFR conditions along the Gulf region. Very nice flying conditions in the Panhandle, marginal conditions through the mountainous areas of the southern mainland, and IFR conditions through much of the Bering Sea into the Aleutians. And once again, marine stratus and low clouds bringing IFR conditions along the Arctic coast. For Thursday afternoon, looking for improved conditions along the Arctic coast and down along the west coast with marginal conditions scattered throughout the area into the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, IFR conditions through much of the Bering and Aleutians, and IFR conditions in portions of the Gulf with continued nice flying weather through the Panhandle. But again, during the afternoon hours, look for thunderstorms pop up, especially in the western interior. Friday morning, IFR conditions again along the Arctic coast there with marine stratus along the west coast as well. Otherwise, a low moving into the Bristol Bay region, and a front associated with that will bring some IFR conditions down through the Panhandle into the northern Gulf and portions of the eastern Kenai. Otherwise, marginal conditions through the mountainous areas of the southern mainland, and IFR conditions through the Bering and Aleutians. For Friday afternoon, some improving conditions down there in the Bristol Bay region, southwest, and continued IFR conditions with marine stratus along the Arctic coast, but otherwise IFR conditions through much of the Bering and Aleutians, and marginal conditions showing up in the Panhandle and eastern interior. But again, look for afternoon thunderstorms, especially over the western interior. For past conditions on Thursday, Anaktuvik VFR, Adigan VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill went for marginal conditions down that way, but no longer expecting afternoon thunderstorms there. Rainy marginal conditions, windy marginal conditions as well. Isabel VFR early, decreasing to marginal conditions during the day. Same for Mentasta. Tanita VFR out that way. Portage VFR, but expect some marginal conditions in the eastern entrance. And Chilkoot VFR during the day, but decreasing to marginal conditions by the afternoon, evening hours. For freezing levels, looking at 8,000 foot freezing levels through much of the mainland, 6,000 foot freezing level down through the west coast and into the Alaska Peninsula, 8,000 foot freezing level as you get into the Gulf, and 6,000 foot freezing level over the Panhandle. Icing conditions for Thursday with all of the activity, it looks like 10,000 feet and above, and some considerable moderate areas scattered across the southwest and into the eastern Kenai and down through the Alaska Peninsula. Jet stream Thursday, low pressure systems, 45 to 50 are kind of clockwise flow around that. 50 knots as you get into the Kenai, 60 knots into the southwest, and 50 and 65 as you move up into the northwest. And you have to get down south of the Alaska Peninsula to get an 130 knot jet. 120 knots cutting across the central Aleutians, otherwise 90 knots just off the coast of the Panhandle in somewhat northwesterly flow. 9,000 foot winds for Thursday, again dealing with that low pressure system in the Bristol Bay area, 35, 45, even 50 knots cutting across the Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise 35 knots as you get into the Kenai Peninsula of the southerly winds, and that extends up into the southwest into the west with 45 knots in the western interior. For 3,000 foot winds on Thursday, again low pressure system, kind of clockwise flow around that system, 55 knots in the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise 50 knots as you get into the Kenai Peninsula from the southeast. And for turbulence on Thursday, looking at below 2,000 feet over St. Lawrence Island, otherwise below 4,000 feet, with areas of considerable moderate over portions of the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and even over into the Kenai Peninsula, but otherwise look for afternoon thunderstorms will be the main driver over the interior.
I can't really name anyone that has so much integrity as she does to the things that she's accomplishing. It's pretty amazing. Having Claire as a role model, just a strong woman in science and just so smart and so kind. It's just a huge confidence booster. Is that, hey, I could do that too, you know? That's possible, that's successful, that's what I want to do.
I would characterize her as a pioneer in the field.
The amount and quality of the work she's put out is second to none.
I know people who have a lot of tenacity. I know people that have integrity, but it's rare that people have both together in that, that combination that Claire does.
Every morning, Dr. Claire Parkinson gets up before sunrise and runs 2 miles to work. She hasn't missed a day in nearly 40 years. To know the evolution of sea ice and how we observe it from space is to know Claire. This year, she's celebrating 40 years at NASA.
When I arrived at Goddard, which was in July of 1978, it was an incredibly exciting period here. Satellites were pretty new, but a lot of data had been collected.
NASA scientists were inundated with information, and Claire was in a cohort looking at sea ice, trying to make sense of a jumble of very raw, very new data. It was around that time that Claire and her team, at the time led by Dr. Jay Zwally, created the principal sea ice record that we use today. How does something like that record help you do your job?
Oh, that record is fundamental to understanding sea ice. So without it, we wouldn't know how rapidly it's changing.
You may not realize it, but Claire's work studying the changing extent of the ice caps deeply affected our understanding of climate change, and relatedly, our understanding of how climate change affects life on Earth.
One of the clearest signals for climate change that resonates with people has been this shrinking of the polar ice cap in the summer that we're able to see because of Claire's work.
After we had a record that was about 15-20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
Sea ice is formed on the surface of the ocean, and therefore is made from seawater. The biggest concentration is in the Arctic, and it's also where the biggest loss in sea ice is occurring. every year NASA reports on the sea ice minimum and maximum extents. As expected, the data is concerning.
By now, not only has this trend toward lesser ice continued, but it's even accelerated, so that now the decreases are greater than what they had been.
These trends are deeply troubling, but one thing's for sure. Our awareness of shrinking sea ice extent due to climate change was propelled faster and further after Claire Parkinson arrived at NASA.
I mean, she takes her job seriously, and the health and welfare of those instruments in space, yeah, she's on it. You know, it's one of the things you don't worry about because Claire's in the loop on these things. It's going to be fine.
In science, we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of those who explored before us. But then, some among us are giants.
For a scientist, it's incredibly exciting to be studying these glaciers and ice sheets right now because they're doing something that hasn't happened in thousands of years. We're watching changes take place that haven't happened since the end of the last ice age. Tuesday was cold, I almost froze my toes. Oh, what's it gonna be next week? Who knows? That's climate. Oh, that's the climate you got. You take a bunch of weather and you average it together and you're doing the climate rock.
At a glacial pace, it means something's happening so slowly you can barely tell it's happening at all. That used to describe the very incremental movement glaciers and ice sheets experienced each year. But now that's changing. We're tagging along with 3 NASA scientists to understand the different lengths they go to not only investigate ice sheets and glaciers, but also communicate their often complicated science to the public. First, let's get oriented. Ice sheets, in pink, pretty much occur in only 2 places, Antarctica and Greenland. Glaciers, in yellow, play a key role draining melt off the ice sheet. Glaciers are also found in the high mountains, but we'll get to those in another episode.
So we know that something's happening in Greenland right now that's unprecedented in the last several thousand years.
That's Dr. Josh Willis, oceanographer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Josh and his team are tackling one of the major environmental challenges of the 21st century, trying to answer fundamental questions about how melting glaciers impact sea level rise.
With my mission, Oceans Melting Greenland, or OMG for short, we're trying to understand just how much of Greenland's melt is caused by the oceans.
Along with being one of NASA's top scientists working on the cryosphere, Josh is passionate about demystifying climate change in typically unconventional ways.
I think by reaching out to people with a little bit of humor, a little bit of fun, maybe a song, you really have the opportunity to help people understand and come to terms with what we're doing to our planet. Because it's definitely happening and it's definitely a big deal, and we need to start preparing for it.
Down at the opposite pole, Dr. Kelly Brunt is getting ready for a major expedition.
In December and January this coming year, I'll actually be in Antarctica, down near the South Pole, collecting ground-based GPS data.
This is actually Kelly's second expedition to the South Pole. The first occurred in December and January of last year. Both surveys are critical and will help validate data collected by NASA's airborne campaign, Operation Icebridge, and the recently launched satellite mission ISAT-2.
All 3 of these layers, that ground-based, that airborne, and the satellite, are all tied together. The ground-based helps validate both the satellite and the airborne helps give us more validation data for the satellites, but also a bigger story with respect to the depth of the ice sheet and what's going on underneath the surface.
While some scientists are taking measurements in the field, others are looking for answers in physics and lines of code.
For me, those projections that we are doing, they do have a very personal meaning.
Dr. Sophie Nowicki is an ice sheet modeler. That means she and her team have the important job of forecasting how ice will change in the future, which also predicts changes in sea level rise. It's a job she doesn't take lightly, especially since urban planning and infrastructure use her team's models to make decisions about the future and safety of their communities.
When we make those projections that are 100 years in the future, 100 years can seem so far away, like I don't have to worry about it, it's just too far. But actually they are not. It's really like the future that we are looking at that our children or grandchildren will see to experience.
Whether it's learning to communicate in new ways, traversing a swath of Antarctica in a massive piston bully, or taking responsibility for an impactful climate forecast, our NASA explorers are pushing the limits of discovery every day. But on a very human level, they're people with families and friends who have a stake in finding out why and how the planet is changing as rapidly as it is.
Every place, at least so far, that we have found life, we found water along with it. And so when we try to understand the thresholds for life, where life might exist elsewhere in our solar system and the universe, water is one of those things that we look for.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at the sea ice analysis for today. Ice forecaster did not feel comfortable opening up the Arctic coast there. He did have less than 1/10 of ice concentration in that region, but otherwise in Alaska waters pretty open statewide. For Thursday's marine forecast for southeast, inside waters, winds generally from the south, 10 to 20, seas as high as 4 feet. Outside waters, winds generally from the southeast at 15 to 25 along the North Gulf there, otherwise seas as high as 8 feet. And for Friday, inside waters, winds generally from the south at 15, seas as high as 3 feet. Outside waters, winds generally from the southwest at 15 to 20, seas as high as 10 feet. For Thursday's marine forecast, south central Gulf region, winds generally from the east at 30, seas as high as 8 feet. Prince William Sound, winds generally from the east at 25, seas as high as 6 feet. And in the Cook Inlet region, winds generally from the northeast at 20, seas as high as 5 feet. And in the Kamishak Bay region, winds from the southeast at 35, seas as high as 13 feet. Look for gale force warnings for that area. For Friday, for the Gulf region, winds generally from the west at 15 to 20, seas as high as 9 feet. In Prince William Sound, winds generally from the east at 20, seas as high as 3 feet. And along the North Gulf there, winds from the south at 25, seas as high as 9 feet. For the Cook Inlet region, winds generally from the west or northwest with 10 to 15 knots there, otherwise seas as high as 3 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, around Kodiak Island, winds generally from the southerly direction, 25 to 30, seas as high as 14 feet. And south side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the west at 35, seas as high as 18 feet. Look for gale force warnings out there. And north side of the peninsula, winds generally from the west at 35, seas as high as 16 feet. Again, gale warnings posted for that. And in Bristol Bay region, winds generally from the south at 15, seas as high as 4 feet. And for Friday, around Kodiak Island, winds generally from the west at 25 to 30, seas as high as 15 feet there. South side of the peninsula, winds generally from the west at 30, seas as high as 12 feet. Likely small craft or gale force warnings there. On the north side of the peninsula, winds generally from the west at 30, seas as high as 12 feet. And for Thursday, loosened chain, winds generally from the west at 20 to 35 with gusts of 50. Look for storm force warnings out there. At seas as high as 17 feet. And for Friday, loosened chain, winds generally from the west or southwest, 15 to 20, seas as high as 9 feet there. For West Coast on Thursday, winds generally from the north at 25 to 30. Look for gale or small craft advisories out that way. Otherwise, seas as high as 12 feet. And for Friday, winds generally from the west or northwest 10 to 20, with seas as high as 6 feet around the Pribilofs. For the Arctic coast, Thursday, winds generally from the east at 15 to 25, seas as high as 5 feet in the open water areas. In the Chukchi Sea region, looking for winds out of the north at 20 to 25, seas as high as 6 feet, and down through the southern part of the Bering Strait, winds from the north at 30, seas as high as 9 feet. Look for small craft. Advisories there. And for Friday, winds out of the east 15 to 20, with seas as high as 4 feet, and down through Chukchi Sea, winds from the northeast at 15 to 25, seas as high as 5 feet. Southern part of the Bering Strait, winds from the northwest at 20, seas as high as 6 feet. And for tonight's weather, look for that 985 millibar low with a occluder front moving through the southwest, rain, fog, through the southwest and Alaska Peninsula, Aleutians, and lingering rain along the west coast, and around another low near the Panhandle, light rain showers there. Otherwise, fog along the Arctic coast. And for Thursday's weather, occluder front moves into the Gulf, rain through much of the region over the southern mainland, moderate rain and even heavy rain possible in the Prince William Sound region. Otherwise, rain throughout much of the southwest into Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, with thermal trough through the interior into Canada, with thunderstorms likely in the afternoon, and again fog along the Arctic coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.